Now is it better? Yeah, now the echo is stopped. Yeah. Okay. So good evening, everybody. This evening we have a very distinguished speaker, and Captain Ramchandran is not only the cool Amavan amongst the kids of my generation, but he is also a war veteran. He was a tank commander in the 1971 Bangladesh War. He's a military history buff and an author of several books. So welcome, sir, and over to you for the rest of the evening.
Thank you very much, Shibu, for inviting me here in the first place. And thank you very much for the introduction. Am I audible and clear? Absolutely.
Yes, yes, you're clear.
Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. First, let me thank you all for this opportunity to interact with you on a topic that I'm passionate about. Let me begin by questioning a myth which is ingrained into the people of India by an oft-repeated statement or leaders reveling that for the last 5,000 years, India has not invited anybody, any country. We have only been invaded upon. I don't find it very flattering. I mean, it's like being told that we have been a punching bag for all the country. More so when it is absolutely false. The Maurya Empire extended all the way up to Afghanistan. The Chola Empire encompassed all of Southeast Asia. All these couldn't have been accomplished without conquest, organized military campaigns. Then how do we say we have not invited anybody? The reality, ladies and gentlemen, is that the India or the cultural entity we imagine as India has always had a great martial tradition. Otherwise, we couldn't have had epics like Ramayana and Mahabharata. I defined India as a cultural identity because the India as we see today did not exist before 1947. What we had was a subcontinental conglomeration of states, all of them, many of them warring against each other. It is this warring culture which produced a great warrior like Porus, who turned out to be the greatest enemy Alexander the Great had to confront. But this warring culture, it underwent a transformation post Ashoka. We turned into a land of pacifist. You can argue that the virtues of peace. I don't think this transformation did us any good. People became complacent about their nationhood. They started ignoring the security of the borders. We rendered ourselves vulnerable to all kinds of foreign invasions. I don't want to go into the churning that took place in subsequent years. Somebody's got might be muted. Yeah.
Can everybody mute, please?
Can everybody mute? Rather distracting. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I don't want to go into the churning that took place in subsequent years, the rise and decline of the Mughals, the challenges posed to them by Marathas and the Sikhs, and the internecine quarrel between a multitude of smaller states, and so on and so forth. At the end of the day, when the British began their the colonization drive, we had a divided house, which made it easy for them to creep into power to subterfuge and coercion. Ironically, the military power they used was nominally British. It was Indian sepoys fighting for the English East India Company. The English East India Company recruiting these Indian soldiers. That is what marked the beginnings of the Indian Army. Because of that origins, the pre-independent Indian Army was always looked upon as a mercenary force. it isn't altogether a fair judgment if you have a, if you take a closer look at things. It is basically the incompetence of the native rulers to make use of the vast military potential available in the country, which resulted in the East India Company exploiting the situation and raising the Sepoy armies. Let me elaborate this point a little bit. The native Indian rulers, the Rajas and Nawabs, they were an imbecile lot. These concerned about the welfare of the states and the subjects. And only concerned about the pursuits of their pleasure. And they were always fighting. The wars were common, although none of them maintained a regular army. So whenever there was a war, they'll send out a call to arms by beating drums or whatever. A rabble assembled, and the ruler will march at the head of this ragtag militia, riding an elephant. And when these two warring forces came face to face with each other, whichever side had lesser number of people will just turn tail and walk off. That was what they called war. There was never really any fighting. Because there was no fighting as such, they never found a necessity to import military training. This rabble which assembled, they were treated as contract labor, dismissed once the need was over. Since such wars were common, the country was abundant with freebooters roaming around for looking for employment. They found the English East India, Europeans, basically French first and the British later, when they started, when they began entering the political arena of India and wanted a military clout, they found these freebooters. No, they were actually men who could be trained into good, competent soldiers. They found tapping this local source of manpower much wiser than importing mercenaries from Europe, which is proving expensive. So that was the beginnings of this Sepoy levy system recruiting. And as far as the Sepoys were concerned, they were happy to find regular employment and also an opportunity to get trained in the art of modern warfare as it developed in Europe. There are no loyalties. Whoever was paying better, when they're more than that, they went to whichever side was winning battles. In fact, in the early stages of colonial history, when there was Anglo-French conflict going on, Sepoys were known to switch sides. Eventually, the British established their supremacy and raised larger Sepoy armies. More often than not, the Sepoy armies came from this same region, which of sovereigns the British were fighting against. The Sepoys had no cons about it because they had no loyalty to these worthless rulers who never cared about them. As far as they were concerned, the British were just another player fighting for political supremacy among the many that is going on in the country. And they paid well. The British suddenly, the Battle of Buxar, where the Mughal Emperor Shah Alam II, it's a classic example of how incompetent the Indian rulers were and how well the British exploited the situation. Hector Munro, commander, the British commander, fielded only 7,000 men against this overwhelmingly superior Mughal army of 40,000 strong Mughal army. Yet he won the battle because of the superior discipline and training of his troops. And amazingly, all Munro's troops came from Mughal domain. So this went on. The soldiers, they had no, the Sepoys, They had no feeling of being unpatriotic either, because the concept of India was still not born. Their only loyalty was to themselves and to the profession of soldiering. They wanted to mold themselves into top-class soldiers. That is what made the Indian Army in later years one of the finest fighting forces in the world. Over the centuries, they formed the largest all-India armies during the world wars, and by as admitted the British themselves, winning the two world wars with the Allies. Our public perception, they always remained the sword arm of the British Empire. Rightly so. Is that not only that they conquered the whole of India, that conquered most of Asia as well. There's one part of the sordid story which is often missed out. The Sepoy Rebellion of the 1857 was one of the most defining moments in India's colonial history or imperialistic history. Soldiers, although it was put down, now the suppression of the mutiny, or mutiny as they call it, the rebellion as we call it, whatever. Again, that the British didn't achieve it by any feat of British arms. It is again, it's our internal contradictions which went to the army. There was, of course, poor leadership and lack of pan-Indian appeal, but it was basically our internal contradiction which ended in the rebellion failing. Barely 10 years before the revolt, the same sepoys had defeated the Sikhs of Punjab, and they were still fighting the Pathans at the northwest frontier. And Gurkhas were subdued not long before either. These three segments, the Sikhs, Pathans, and the Gurkhas, they had no sympathy with the sepoys' cause, and they were more than happy to join the British in putting down the sepoys. See how cleverly the British made use of the internal contradictions. And as we all know, they continued with this trend of divide and rule, pushing us to the Holocaust we call partition. That's a different story. They're continuing with the sepoy story. Although the rebellion failed, it rang the death knell of English East India Company. The British Crown took over the administration of India. This was a landmark happening. The subsequent developments of which put India on an inexorable path of freedom. So, strictly speaking, the sepoys took the first step towards India's freedom. No wonder many call it the first war of independence. The last war of independence was more or less won by the Indian Armed Forces. That will come to later. So, the Indian Army that took part in the world wars were a highly professional force. It's, for years of campaigning and top-class training the British imported. They were loyal to their regiments and their profession. It did not mean that they're absolutely oblivious to the national movement which is picking up outside. In fact, they believed they're contributing to the cause, at least in case with the soldiers of the First World War, as letters now being revealed from letters from the Western Front now being revealed stands testimony that these soldiers genuinely believe that by their fighting well, they will be rewarded with freedom for the country. In fact, Gandhiji believed this. Gandhiji encouraged them to Indians to enlist. Although the ungrateful Britain rewarded him with what they rewarded him with was Jallianwala Bagh after the war. If such was the case, why did so many men enlist again during the Second World War? The answer was India's perennial perpetual problem over the soldiers, the British Indian Army, were no different than millions of civilians, Indians, who served the British in the civilian capacity. At that time, the British-run government of India was the best paymaster in India. And the soldiers fighting for the for Britain, they staunchly believed they were that utmost faith that whatever, if they die, their families will be taken care of by the Sarkar, as they call the government. And the government did it. The British had to keep the morale of the fighting men up. So they looked after their families. So when it's a very dramatic kind of thing. Considering the sad circumstance of her enlistment, these men fought with such courage and dedication. I mean, basically because of their soldiers' honor and soldierly ethics, rather than call it. It speaks of how what fine human beings they were. And also during the Second World War, there was a new thinking which is taking roots within the army. Because in case of, they knew independence was not far. And the new India, we actually benefited from a professional army. In fact, General Timaya, as a young officer, had led the Congress leadership, offered to resign and join the political struggle, but he was advised not to do so because his service would be required in that. Eventually, when Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose entered the fray with his Indian National Army, the soldiers of the British Army, especially those in Burma and Northeast India who was facing INA and the Japanese, they were in a dilemma which is traumatic to the extreme. In fact, novelist Amitav Ghosh has captured it fairly well in his book, Lost Palace, inspired by inputs from his own father, who was an officer in the British Army. It's soldiers like him, for serving for years, this regimental spirit and military discipline is ingrained in them. That impelled them to keep fighting under the British flag. At the same time, the pull of the emotionalism, which with the irrefutable appeal of patriotism which INA was propagating, it was hard. It was quite a hard time for them. Actually, the British officers in the Eastern Front, all of them were perpetually on tenterhooks. Especially when the INA started using loud hailers, calling out to the soldiers to desert and join their ranks. But by and large, they didn't. Why? It is a perplexed analyst. The British explained it that it was because of a matter of patriotism. They were, for the first time, they were defending their own Indian soil, so the soldiers didn't desert it. But that is too naive to accept it. Because the core motive of INA was opposing the most patriotism. It's quite possible that the soldiers were, they were apprehensive about siding with Japan, considering given the Japan's, record of atrocities committed in the countries they conquered. But more reasonable or the most potent reason, as far as I can see, was the inherent makeup of an Indian soldier, which it was then, which it is now. You would never want to be called a Gadda, Namak Haram, as they call it, that you would want. properly motivated, he might have deserted before the war, but certainly not in the fire. An Indian soldier will never ever desert the post or let down his comrade in arms, even if he's alien, while a fight is on. That is what saved the battle of the British. When all this trauma was telling on the troops. I mean, it is quite a traumatic experience, and what the INA did not achieve in the battlefield, they eminently did after the war, the post-war developments in India. But by the impact their actions had on the military establishment at large, and by galvanizing the political movement outside. In fact, British, to project their unbiased image, they put 3 officers on trial from 3 different faiths. The Prem Sagar, Gurubakh Singh and Shahnawaz Khan. The effect was electric. The whole country rose as one, forgetting all their differences, declaring solidarity for the trial. Within the armed forces, this frustration of being looked upon as those who sided with the British, it was taking its toll, while the INA was openly challenging it. They were siding with the British. That kind of shame, that is, it was taking its toll on the soldiers. The British officers found they were not receiving the respect that they were used to. At least one Air Force pilot is known to have refused to obey orders to staff civilians who were picketing. Will you do that in England? He asked his superior, who thought it better to follow his order. The British establishment was so jittery, they planned an operation, a contingency plan they put together called Operation Birla. You know, whatever British troops were available, they put it on alert, and they made out a plan. What we put in the effect in case the army revolted. Then it came out in the open, burst out into the open with naval mutiny. Although it fizzled out, with lacking political support, the British saw the writing on the wall. Clement Attlee, the British Prime Minister, had only one question to Lord Auchinleck, the Commander-in-Chief of the Indian Army, before he presented the Indian Independence Bill to the Parliament. Can the loyalty of the Indian Army be taken for granted should there be trouble? Auchinleck's reply was an unequivocal no. And that sealed the decision for them to quit when they could still get out in one piece. That was the story of independence, as personally affected by Clement Attlee in subsequent years after he relinquished the chair of the Prime Minister. It's not trying to. It's the whole point is our armed forces did make a contribution, silent, but very effective contribution in our attaining the freedom. I'm not underplaying the non-violent movement, Gandhiji's non-violent movement. Gandhiji brought, it had great impact. He brought awareness to people. All I'm saying is the Indian independence was achieved by multiple factors, all complementing each other in the effort. In fact, Japan and Germany contributed a lot by impoverishing Britain. So I'm not forgetting the pressure the US put on and freedom to India. As the British historian Patrick French succinctly put it, the British Empire had become militarily and economically untenable. But that is not the way a battery of our historians after the independence. Sorry. They, in their eagerness to please the ruling dispensation who wanted to project India as a peace-loving country, they gave more than its due to the non-violent movement, underplaying whatever the armed forces did. Then the ruling class, they went the extra mile, changing the order of precedence, bringing down the prestige of the armed forces. In fact, the British Army, the last British Commander-in-Chief of the Indian Army, Roy Butcher, he wanted to have a discussion with Nehru on what would be the military doctrine for new independent India. Nehru is believed to have gave the infamous answer, what do you need a military doctrine for? You're not fighting any wars. Yet, of course, had to eat his words. The raiders started pouring down the Kashmir Valley. His subsequent blunders, kind of in Pandashil in 1962, when he refused to use air power, which could have turned the tide in India's favor. It's all part of the sordid chapter for history. Projecting India as a peace-loving nation, or losing India's image as a peace-loving nation, and fear of escalation seemed to be weighing more in his mind than the security of the country, while the enemy was not at the doors of Assam. Ladies and gentlemen, please don't perceive it as I am talking politics. I have no political information. This is bare facts of history. In fact, I fought the 1971 war, and I'm always an admirer of his daughter who gave brave leadership to me at the time. But then Nehru was a great man, but he was a disaster military. That's what he was trying to say. It's okay to sort of believe in peaceful coexistence and, looking down upon the Indian Army for its mercenary origins. It's all fine. But everything in life is not black and white. We have however the history might have shaped it, we were fighting a war even before we had finished celebrating our independence. And we had a highly professional army waiting and ready to do that. Where would we have been if the army was not there? So the legacy of the Indian Army and about being mercenary and all these, everything is buried in that. We had a fine army, which was there then, which is there now. The great democracies like Britain, US, they survive because they respect their armed forces. And the armed forces in turn respect the constitution and recognize the supremacy of the elected government. It's a fine, it's a delicate balance which any successful democracy has to strike. Unfortunately, our political leadership, irrespective of the dispensation, have failed to maintain this balance. They will go overboard, singing glory of the armed forces for their political ends, but never serious. They look after the armed forces or look after the defense needs of the people in good federal. They're not sincere about it. This works. I don't want to go into the contemporary situation where everything is told to be hunky-dory, but it's not. We are still, in our defense policies, we still have an attitude of reactive attitude. We need to have a proactive attitude. And we need to have faith in our strength that we were, and if need be, can turn into a warring nation. and the leader rises. Instead of uttering self-defeating statements like, we have never invaded anybody. Thank you, Jeff. Yeah.
So we are looking forward to your experience in the Bangladesh war.
That will come to later. Are there anything you will ask about the topic that we're talking about? Bangladesh war will come to later. So.
Yeah, thank you for that. Emma, so one of the main things that has always sort of concerned me is how come the armed forces never, I don't know, maybe they were putting across their point and their requirements but was it done forcefully enough? Was it, you would think that they were the best people to understand the requirements of the nation, and that should be put across forcefully and strongly. And, so for example, instead of becoming a lean and mean army, we are a force which is very huge in manpower. So, I don't know how the army has put all these points across. For example, when they build a hospital here, the government is very happy to put up the latest equipment and everything, but they're very reluctant to give any manpower. So how come in the army it's like almost the reverse? You want the best equipment, but you get the worst equipment, and you have enough men who are like fodder for the enemy. So why does that happen?
See, about the lean and mean army, in the first place, as you yourself said, they have been very, the government has been very tardy in giving proper equipment. Even the mountaineering, the equipment for the snow warriors, there's a big fight. Even getting the snow scooters. In fact, George Fernandez had to go there and take some of these bureaucrats there and tell them to live in Seattle for a week before they approve it. This is, I have nothing against bureaucrats, their class, but bureaucrats put a lot of block for whatever demands come from the army. A lean and mean army is possible only when you have the right equipment. Right now, we have men, and these men, it's not easy to sort of, for one thing, army is a behemoth. The systems there change slowly. It has been, it is a 2,000-year-old tradition, whatever army goes on. And when we do not have the equipment and to make a lean and mean army, the sending out men won't help. And then, they'll be paying more pension than salary. So it's a very complicated situation, unless this is what precisely I was saying. With the government, it should be determined. There must be political will to do this. Army alone cannot do it. And about the forcefulness about the leadership, I want to give you an example. Again, I'm not being political. What happened in 1962? You see, this Chinese debacle, it is not that the leadership, it was known much before. General Thorat, who was a Second World War veteran and an eminent leader, he had already made out this and sent the papers to Defense Minister, Army headquarters rather, that this is the situation that the Chinese are likely to, this aggression is likely to take place. No one, it never went to the Prime Minister. It remained with, it went up to a defense minister, fisherman and put it under the carpet. So whatever. When ultimately, when all this fiasco happened, fisherman had to step down. Nehru in his despair asked fisherman and he said, what can we do? So fisherman was called, why then General Thorat had retired? Fisherman said, call Thorat back. So the man knew this man is good. He is telling the right thing. And General Thorat, a special Air Force plane, went to Pune and picked him up and brought him to Delhi. He met Nehru. He said, what can be done? He said, what can be done? Now already, now they are voluntarily sort of going out. Well, let's take it. We are disgraced. Nothing much can be done about it now. So then we told him that, this is the kind of report he had anticipated. Nehru asked him, why don't I come to know about it? I said, that is the problem. There's something your defense minister must answer, sir. And he said, "Oh, you're always after defense minister." This was Nehru's one problem, his attachment with him. You see, the top brass in the army, there's a, it's an organization which is drilled in discipline. They will not go out of their way to. That's a very, very difficult thing. Whereas, and one more, that is a drawback with the Indian brass also, I would say. See, before independence, no Indian had sort of fought above brigade, or at best was the brigade level. More than that, the Indians had not advanced. So they did not have an opportunity to reach the top and see what the problems are. Where the British officers, whether it's Montgomery, whether it's America, it is George Patton. So they have been dealing with the government, top-ranking sort of assignments they're already done. Where the Indian democracy itself was new. The leaders also should have realized, everything. They all should have been ready to learn. Like I said, General Thorat put up this report. He said that is his duty, that is he supposed to put up. The political leadership also must realize this is the way democracies function. So you must be because of Fisherman's, the Chinese or communist inclinations or whatever, keeping those reports not going to the top is actually sinful. This is how it has to be a combined effort. You see, unless you want something like Pakistan, the military taking over, whereas Indian armed forces have kept a very dignified stance following the British traditions. They have never gone against the thing. And the political leadership has to act accordingly, which does not happen. I'm not saying that, as I said, there was weakness on the armed forces side because, for example, even General Thimayya, the great man, the chief, he, because of difference with Fisherman, he put up his papers. Nehru persuaded him to withdraw it. It's not because the whole point was, Nehru's image those days was so big, so large. And Thimayya thought, it may not be in the interest of the country. It's like that, you see, like differences between Nehru and Patel used to be, sort of kept on the, Patel was careful about it, not to let it come out. The reason being in the interest, these are great men who thought about the country's good. They may also probably about that, chief resigning is it's a new democracy. So it's very unfortunate, the political leadership had been sensitive to these things, such things won't happen. Even now, I don't know how far the advices are being taken from the top leadership, top military leadership by the I hope I cannot give you a direct answer.
Yeah.
Shibu,
Uttaraman sir, go ahead.
Yeah, Captain, your presentation was extremely interesting to me. I have some military background, but that's not important here. Indian Army, wherever it has gone and fought, in whichever theater it operated, it has actually done remarkably well, whether it was the Second World War, or whether it is against Pakistan, or against Bangladesh, and many other encounters. But against China in 1962, something went wrong. I'm not sure whether it has anything to do with the relative powers of China and India, but it is something beyond that. So I wanted a comment from you on that subject. If I know you mentioned something on that. That is one question, but I have a larger question and larger comment. I have always believed that in any country, the military strategy, the strategy of foreign affairs, the strategy of economic development, all these three have to be aligned together. If these three are not aligned together, irrespective of what army you have, irrespective of how good foreign minister you have, it will not work. Because it is like there are countries with whom you don't want to fight because of economic reasons, but we go and fight. There are countries in which you need to build better relations, but we go and fight. And there are countries with whom we need to fight and which we should not even bother about because we have nothing to gain on economic relations. We don't fight with those countries. So there is something wrong in the integration of these three strategies, which has been the case in India for many, many years. Do you see any difference in the last 5-10 years on that strategy? That's my second question.
Your second question is more of a statement than a question. Anyway, I'll come to that because it's a fact what you're saying. So I'll answer your first question about the 1962 debacle. How exactly it would have happened? That's not your question, I suppose. Why it would have happened? I mean, this is with the Indian Army's track record of never losing a battle. It happened in 1962. We had to withdraw. This is one army which doesn't treat withdrawal as a operational war.
Your voice is breaking, Amar.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Okay?
yes, better. Yeah, yeah. Maybe the mic should be a little higher.
Yeah. Is it okay now?
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's better now, but it was breaking often.
Okay, 1 minute. Oh, is it now? Is it okay?
Oh, okay, okay.
It seems better.
Seems, I mean, yeah. Go ahead. Let's see how it is. Yeah.
No, probably without mic. I mean, by speaking straight. Can you hear me properly?
Yes, yes, yes.
Audible? Okay. So, yeah, this army is suffering a defeat, technically a defeat, so whatever you may call it, because we can give 101 reasons that we had Second World War vintage weapons. Chinese had the modern machine guns. The whole point is we were the decision to take what we call the forward policy, which the background is rather it's the entire thing will sound so foolish. When the top leadership, I mean, in that sector, they advised we must not take this forward course. A border of two countries go by what we call a watershed. We decide on a border which is defensible. So, because of this, diplomatic role in China, Nehru wanted to show his, clout. He said, you ask the army to sort of take forward position for the watershed. Army advised, they sort of pleaded, no, don't do that. For once, we are going into their territory. That's a violation. Plus, we are going to occupy posts which are indefensible. Now, this is what I'm saying. When a professional advice is received, people must heed to it. Something you don't know, you should not poke your nose and say, no, this is correct. And then, funny enough, to support his, make his convictions, put it on the people in lower commands, he brought in somebody who had no combat experience. Carl was sent in. He was actually an ASC officer who has never seen battle. And when it came to it, he reported sick and went off. That was one of his henchmen. Then came in, Thorat was Thorat was the chief. He was the most competent man to become the army chief after him. Whereas they had taken in Thapar, who is, who was an S-man. Now, how do you expect with poor leadership? You see, there's a saying in the army, there are no good soldiers and bad soldiers. There are only good leaders and bad leaders, or good officers and bad officers.
For a moment, if we put behind what happened in 1962 and fast forward it to what happened in 2019-20, right? I mean, I'm nowhere close to what the reality was. How do you look at it? I mean, we were at a point when we thought we are going to literally have a fight with China.
That's
Then it
right.
started getting diffused. Okay, the international geopolitical situation is different. I also accept that. But how do you, as an army person, really look at what was it that changed now as compared to what happened in 1962?
I would say, attitude-wise, of course, we were more prudent and we didn't take any foolish step. But in my talk itself, I said we are still in a reactive mode. What we did when it happened wasn't good enough, in my own opinion. I mean, that may not be the classic opinion, because what You see, for example, they were holding, they were doing what they call the salami slicing. That is what China's policy. Take a little here, little poke in here. We should, it's the army strategy, the standard army strategy is offense is the best form of defense. When they are doing it, we should have countered it. I was saying that, when dialogues, when they occupied our place, it doesn't stand to any point. We should also put them in a place where, in a point where they are forced to, sort of. It's kind of like calling the bluff. It's not that China can come in, we should know our strengths. That's what I'm saying. China cannot come and just come across the border. We have got the finest mountain army in the world at the moment, fighting Siachen on for so many years. And in any case, if you look at it intelligently, I will say, not claiming I'm so intelligent, but one can make out it's absolutely matter of logic. They're not there to have a border war. Chinese are doing this to make India suffer economically. Because the moment you have a border dispute, we got to commit troops, we keep sending out. The competition is about economics, not about military. So we keep spending the money. So we should not grow, one. And not only that, whatever money we are spending on the defense budget, it must all go to the army. As it is, the army gets the chunk of about 60% of the defense budget, it goes to the army. And another 25% is taken away by the Air Force. Only 15% goes to Navy, whereas China is concerned about Indian Navy. A larger Indian Navy is China's nightmare. Because South China Sea, all their trade routes goes by Indo-Pacific. That if we have a larger Navy, we got to block it. So India should not do that. They must not spend on Navy. They must keep spending on the Navy. I mean, not only they must erode our economics, they should also make sure that no money goes to the Navy. In fact, that is why I say they're so vocal about, when we said we will go for Quad, without Quad, with this, because of our weakness of the Navy, that's why we are partly dependent on the Quad. We need that. It's quadrilateral with Australia, US, and India. Right. So we can block China. So China doesn't want it. So you can very clearly say his war is in the South China Sea. He's not border. So he's breaking this so that it happens. So what we can do, if, of course, as it is saying, if I was the king, but the whole point is, we should have made, the signs as if we want to liberate. It may mean escalation, doesn't matter. But we are intending to do that. We are always timid. Even when saying we thought so long to say that we are going to admit take in Australia into the for the Malabar exercise. We should not be that timid about it. China, we should have the confidence, call the bluff. Chinese are not going to fight in the northern border because, okay, they might cause it. They have got missiles. We also got missiles. They can cause some damage, but they're also going to suffer. It's a different thing with Pakistan. They have nothing to lose. They can come and fight. But China is not going to fight. They have got so much money invested. All that they're interested, they must not let India grow. It's a matter of competition on all fronts. So they'll do all that. So my take is in 2019-20, we did what they considered as appropriate. It might have been appropriate, but that is not enough. We got to be more aggressive. So any post, even when this sports thing was going on, whatever they vacated, they should have gone and sat there. Let them cry. Let them say that they try to get us out. And I don't know what happened to this height which we occupied. If we lose that, it's going to be a sad thing. So
thank you, sir. Thank you.
So the next question you were asking me was about the coordination, about diplomacy, economics, and all this. You're very right. The country's defense policy, it cannot be taken in solitude. It is connected to all this. There has to be coordination with all these sort of centers. Whether it is,
for example, sorry to interrupt you. For example, China and India cannot have a war.
Cannot have a war.
We know that. I mean, but India is not making it possible for not to have a war. For some reason, I always find that while China may be aggressive here, there, and so on and so forth, it is more poking than actually wanting to have a war. China actually doesn't want, in my view, I may be wrong, but China doesn't want to have a war.
I quite agree with you. They're
Yeah.
only interested in poking us.
I know, but India does not see it that way. And I see a fault in India's policy in that regard with regard to China. Whereas as far as Pakistan is concerned, it will not lose anything by having a war, and it will just want to have a skirmish and war and so on. And we should just bottle them up completely.
No, and the second part of it, I don't think I can agree with you, because you know that if China, India is hardly being aggressive. China is poking us, and we are just we are going on with dialogues and expecting them to sort of behave. So because even if it is poking, they have got some objective. It is to sort of weaken India. So we got to do things to weaken them. Why not?
Correct.
So it's always, in Hindi they say, "Aag aag se bandhu hota hai." You got to give them tit for tat. We know it, they cannot fight. Then why bother? I mean, look at Pakistan. I mean, it is nothing compared with India. They keep on doing these things because, they're not, because of this nuclear stuff, that we will not go for a all-out assault thinking. Of course, in our history, there was a time when they almost taken out all the nukes. But then again, political leadership. So I don't want to tell the story. So otherwise, Pakistan would have never had the nuclear weapons. And we could have rolled over them. So but we cannot, because as long as there's a nuclear threat, that is one threat, again, we got to call the bluff. What are they going to do? We have said our no first use. They're not saying that. See, the whole point is...
Captain, are we paying enough attention to defense strategy? We used to have a institute in Delhi called the Institute of Defense Studies, headed by Mr. Subramaniam for a very long time.
I think it is still there.
Is it doing any good work? He was Jayashankar's father and an outstanding person.
Yeah, I heard about his name, Subramaniam. He was one of the known names in...
No, but are we paying enough attention to defense strategic studies, or are we more action oriented and not strategy oriented?
No, there's more strategy and talks and discussions and symposiums going on in our country than actual thing.
Any other questions? We can have two more, I think, before we need to wind up. So maybe anything else? Any other questions? Dr. Murli, you were asking something. You're muted.
Yeah, no, I had no questions at all. I mean, I asked, I think, Brigadier when he spoke about not employing the Air Force during the Chinese aggression, and he's answered it. So,
okay,
really nothing.
And there's one more question in the chat about what is your view about the role played by economically and socially disadvantaged people being the main source of the lower ranks of the army in the old British Army? So is that the reason people used to, collect in the British Army?
Come again?
So was it financial reason that induced the Indians to become part of the British Army? Sam is asking that. So is that what drove them to be affiliated to the British rather than to, support the Indian kind of thing?
See, as I said, then they were very much like millions of Indians who served in civilian capacity. They had no other option. I mean, they're temperamentally, physically suited for military service. So they went in. But they made it good. I mean, since despite those circumstances, they fought well. It is poverty. There was nothing else in explaining why so many men. I mean, in fact, if you know, there's a recent book which has come out. It is called The Coolies' Great War. 1/3 of all these forces, 1.5 million during First World War, 2.5 million during Second World War. 1/3 of these numbers are non-combatants. In fact, if you remember way back in Kerala, the people used to call soldiers Kuli Patala, because that is because of so much of labor core was raised. So that they were all taken because of poverty only. I mean, they go work as labor, far worse conditions than the fighting men. Does that answer the question?
Yeah. So, anybody else? Dave, you want to ask something?
Ask, but I wanted to greet Captain Ramachandran. Hello, sir. Can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, I can hear you.
You're muted now, Dave.
Okay, one sec. One sec.
Yeah. Now it's.
Again, cannot hear you.
He's muted.
One sec.
Yeah, just leave it like that. Don't touch it now.
Okay. So you can hear me.
Yeah, I
Sir,
can hear you.
yeah. So I had written to you in January about your article on Colonel G.T. Thambi. And
I see.
I had linked you with General Madan, who's from the same Paltan.
See, you are from the army.
No, my dad, Lieutenant Colonel K. Vasudevan Nair, had run away from home in
I remember
1943
a letter coming. In fact, there was
and
so
joined
many
the signals.
I never
And-
knew when I was writing this. Colonel Thambi was so popular.
Right, sir.
I had quite a few lieutenant generals calling who were sons of people who served with him.
Right,
And
sir.
he was quite a respect. I mean, in fact, he's quite well known in Chennai also. He was in the.
Right, sir. In fact, Lieutenant General Madan had mentioned that how he used to freeze bottles of beer in Kargil and then take it inside. And take it inside and keep it in front of the fire.
Yeah.
And one more thing, it's wonderful. I could meet one of my dad's old colleagues, Brigadier Subramaniam, here. And in between, we passed messages to each other and exchanged numbers also. So that's it, sir. Incidentally, I'm working on 1857 in Mau, Indore and Malwa.
Oh, I see.
So something will come out soon. I'll share a copy with you.
Wonderful.
Right.
Go ahead.
I've written on defense from Mau for DNA and Hindustan Times as a freelancer. So something or the other is always on. It was great hearing you, sir. Thank you.
One final thing about what you said is the title of your topic. How much do you think the army is a reflection of the nation? Across the world, do you think if you have a strong army, then you're considered a great nation? Is that what your title kind of reflects?
Excellent question. I only went through the history and what role politically the army played. I think there's one aspect which I actually forgot. It's good that you asked this. You want to bring out this Indian army. I mean, we hear a lot of political and other noises talking about secularism. You see, we are one country, and if there is one institution in this country which is strictly secular and following it religiously, it is the Indian army. That is the biggest importance of the Indian army.
That is correct.
We don't care whether a man is from Ras or Calcutta or Amritsar or which religion. None of these matter to the soldiers. That is we have what do you call it? I don't know, Sarvajana, something we call it nowadays, the joint prayer hall. For example, I joined my troops were Sikhs. In Gurudwara, I had given this thing, and I was baptized to Sikh. I had to. Those days I used to smoke. I had to keep away from smoking, sort of not to hurt their sentiments. So it's an officer is believed is supposed to follow his troops' religion is his religion, and we had this system of keeping officers from the south of the coast as soon as possible. Northerners will go to south, so it becomes a mix. So that that part of it, national integration in national narrative, this is something which armed forces have remarkably well achieved well. Otherwise, the country's image, yes. I can get you internationally. How does it matter? I mean, you're asking something.
No, I meant across the world. If you look at the different armies, do you think, suppose, say the US, is it like considered a powerful nation because it has a great army and that kind of thing? So is it like essential that you have great armed forces to be perceived as a strong nation? Or you don't think that is that critical or important? That's what I meant.
Yeah, because you see, when you speak from a position of power, always people listen.
Yeah.
That is there. So we do need a powerful army to sort of, especially a country like India, which has problems. For example, if good senses prevail, we can form a, like European Union, if we can form a federation where we can, I mean, after all, peaceful coexistence which Nehru professed was good if it works out. But the whole point is there's something wrong in the DNA of people. People always want to fight. And if you have a country like Pakistan, which is born in hatred, in fact, in 2016, I had been to Dhaka as part of the, the veterans delegation being felicitated there. I heard the army chief there talking. He said, my dream is, very, very, forward-looking man. He said, my dream is that my son can drive from here to Dhaka through Lahore and all the way up to Kabul. Nobody's stopping, we are like one country. That is a dream we can look at. And Asia will be benefited a lot from that. Because we have the world's largest population of poor people in this complex, this situation. And we are fighting each other. We really cannot understand it. It is, Pakistan, like in India, the country owns an army. In Pakistan, the army owns a country. That's the problem. Unless it can be, many people say that, good relations with Pakistan. I feel that, unless you bring down the Pakistan army and give the people a chance to have, like we did it in Bangladesh, things cannot, that is, the hub is there. I mean, why talk about India? It's for the whole world, the terrorist hub is in Pakistan. So unless you break it and give the people, and there are people, it's not that, we cannot see, they cannot speak out. Most ordinary Pakistanis want to breathe, but they cannot. The army's grip is so powerful.
And if we unite the countries, we'll have the best cricket team in the whole world. Nobody can beat us. On a lighter note,
Yeah.
sir.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you, everybody, for a wonderful discussion. And unfortunately, although we can go on discussing endlessly, this topic today has to end. Thank you very much, everybody.
It was very
Good
nice.
night.
Very nice.
Thank you. Thank you. It was lovely. Thank you so much.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Bye.
A lot. Thanks.
Take care.